Yeah, Taoiseach, you see, I found your last answer rather evasive, and let me just frame the question again. See, it's not just about the individual case. It is about how that case epitomises the failure of the government to actually understand what is going on. Or willfully, you're denying what's going on. Because what isn't particularly specific to this case is that there's somebody trapped in homeless accommodation. There's somebody who gets up every day to work, but they're in homeless accommodation for 4 years. Now, does that not in and of itself make you think there's something wrong here? How could somebody be in a homeless accommodation for 4 years? Clearly, and somebody who gets up to work every morning. It's not like lack of energy or drive on their part. There's something wrong with the policy that allows that to happen. And if the only available accommodation, because I heard you say, oh, the majority of people who are evicted aren't probably going to end up homeless. I don't know how you can make that assertion when in the biggest residential development in the state, right, where it could help solve the housing crisis in South Dublin, the new apartments that are now being advertised are €2,600. How is anybody who's an average worker on average income supposed to afford that? If she's eligible for HAP, which for a while she wasn't, they wouldn't allow her to rent that. And if she's not eligible for HAP, she has no chance of being able to rent that. So she's in a trap. Do you understand the point?
Deputy, we've two more slots.
I'm finished.
Finished.
Thanks, Gairloch. Deputies have raised a number of important questions here, but given the time allowed, I think I'll prioritise answering the questions that relate to the Cabinet Commission on Government Coordination, which is the question for this section. In relation to the reasoning given to us by the Department of Housing in relation to the lifting of the eviction moratorium, the Department of Housing's advice and the advice of the Minister for Housing, and by the way, line ministers will attend these committees on occasion if it's relevant to their brief, was that there were three options. One was to end it as planned on the 31st of March, which is what we voted for in this House. The second option was to introduce a rolling winter ban like they have in France. The third option was a 2-year extension. Because the view wasn't taken by the officials that a 4-month or a 6-month or a 5.5 month would be a credible option. Although I know that the opposition parties think differently in that regard. And the strong advice from the Department of Housing, the Minister and his officials was to go for option 1, which was to end it as planned on March 31st. We certainly met the Minister. I can't remember exactly which meeting he attended or not, but we certainly met him. I think so. Almost certainly was. But there was more than one meeting on this, Deputy, as you can imagine. And the very strong assessment from the officials was to go for the option which was to end it as planned on March 31st. In terms of statistical modelling, the view is that it's impossible for anyone to do accurate statistical modelling on something like this. When the eviction ban was put in place, most of us expected to see a fall in the number of people in emergency accommodation, because that's what happened when it was previously in place during the pandemic. We now understand better that there are many other factors at play. We always understood that there are entries and there are exits, and you have to take account the exits as well as the entries, but also the entries into homelessness are manifold. The reason why we've seen the number of people in emergency accommodation continue to rise, even while the eviction ban has been in place, is because there haven't been enough exits, but also there have been continuing entries. The biggest reason for people becoming homeless in the last number of months is family breakdown. And I'm not sure what statistician can actually model how many families will break down in any particular period. There's also the issue of rising numbers of non-citizens and non-citizen families that are becoming homeless. That's gone up from maybe 14 or 15% in 2014 to nearly 40% now, and it's impossible to model accurately how many people from outside of the state will seek emergency accommodation. And I don't think there's been any modelling done by the opposition. We had an indication of the RTB figures, not the exact figures, and what they had indicated was two things. One, that there was an uptick in notices to quit. Why? Driven by the eviction ban. Landlords getting the message, in part as a consequence of the eviction ban, that it had accelerated the number of landlords that were leaving, and that bothered us, and that's one of the reasons why the option 1 was recommended, that the eviction ban and the threat of further eviction bans or further extensions would accelerate the exodus of landlords, thus increasing homelessness, thus driving up rent. So that was very definitely part of the rationale. But we were also advised, and this is important because you should know this if you don't know this already, is that comparisons between the numbers per quarter now and previous quarters are not valid because there was a change in the law and a change in the way notice to quit are counted. So anyone making a comparison with Q3 of last year or the figures to come, Q4 of last year with previous quarters, it is not being accurate because that's very clear.
Thank you, Taoiseach.